It's a beautiful Tuesday morning. Thank you for joining us on Newspaper Review and High Impact Television. My name is God's Time David. How are you? I hope you had an amazing night. If the reverse is the case, never mind. But this morning, quite some stories are making rounds on front pages of the newspapers, and that is stemming from the kidnap that happened 4 days ago in Kebbi State. 80 students were kidnapped alongside 5 teachers, and that story has been there has been updates on that story. Also, yesterday, there were protests in Abuja. Some persons or residents in Abuja staged protests asking for or demanding resignation of President Muhammadu Buhari as a result of the rising insecurity in the country. We also have stories of restructuring resurfacing. That story is one that has not left the front burner for quite some time now, and that story is still on. We got to the chase this morning and begin with the Punch newspapers. On the front page of the Punch newspaper, we see a story how that the farmer and herdsmen clashes has affected the loans from farmers, and the story says bandit and herdsmen farm occupation, insecurity ground CBN borrowers, and farmer says loan repayment is difficult. Hashtag NSAS protesters still in prison with newborn bail application not heard. And court orders federal government to pay Bayelsa $951 million over derivation fund. Final year students to sue Akwa Ibom State University over expulsion for criticizing the government. Ex-convicts robs and rapes octogenarian in Ondo, and stolen phones recovered. Yoruba scholars, monarchs caution Igboho and demand decentralized government. Media bill, Buhari reintroducing decree 4 under different guise, says stakeholders. Protesters block Abuja Airport Road and demand Buhari's resignation over insecurity. Customs prepare to seize private jet over documents verification, and Gbagbo files for divorce to end 30 years marriage. Let's begin with the first story, which is bandit and herdsmen farm occupation. Insecurity grounds CBN borrowers and farmers, says loan repayment is difficult. There are indications that the Central Bank of Nigeria Anchor's Borrowers Program is heading for the rocks as bandits are forcing farmers who took the ABP loans to abandon their farms. Farmers in Zamfara, Kebbi, Sokoto, Ekiti, and Ebonyi State, in separate interviews with newsmen on Monday, said repaying the loans would be tough because bandits had taken over their farms and destroyed crops. Recall that the CBN had in 2015 launched the ABP in line with its developmental function. The program is aimed at creating a linkage between anchor companies involved in processing and smallholder farmers of agricultural commodities. Now, the Nigeria's Anchor Borrowers Program has is heading, according to report that we have here, is heading to the rocks as farmers are finding it difficult to repay their loans. Now, you recall that for quite some time now, for months, insecurity ranging from the farmer and herders clashes has been on in Nigeria, which has affected farmers and their product or produce. Now, this is making it difficult for them to go to their farms, make their plants, or try to get their crops out there for purchasing or for selling, and it's actually making it difficult for them to even pay up their loans, because if they cannot go to the farms, how would they make this money? How would they pay up their loans? That takes us to another story still on the Punch newspaper. Court orders federal government to pay Bayelsa $951 million over derivation fund. The federal High Court sitting in Abuja on Monday ordered the federal government to pay $951 million to Bayelsa State government as the 13% derivative sum due arrears of revenue payable to the state government. While delivering the judgment, Justice Inyang Ekwo held that the Attorney General of the Federation failed to enter his defense in the case, prompting the court to declare the plaintiff's claim as unchallenged. He said where the person to whom such demand notice is issued takes no steps, he is deemed to have admitted the claims, thereby giving other person the option of enforcing the claims by the available procedures for enforcement of undisputed claims. That is what is happening with the case in Bayelsa State, about $951 million. Still on the Punch newspapers this morning, media bill, President Buhari reintroducing Decree 4 on the different guise. That statement is coming from stakeholders in the country. The story says President of the Nigeria Union of Journalists, Christopher Ezigbo, on Monday reiterated the position of stakeholders in the media towards the National Press Council Amendment Bill currently before the National Assembly. He said a stakeholders meeting was important to settle the gray areas. He also added that any regulation that ended towards the control of the media by the government would be resisted. Now, the conversation of the Media Amendment Bill has been on for a very long time, as stakeholders are coming out to say, or rather the chairman of the Nigerian Union of Journalists is saying that any amendment towards regulation of the media would be resisted by the people. We'll have that conversation later when we have our guests join us in the course of the review. In the meantime, Customs prepared to seize private jets over document verification. Private jets owners risk having their airplanes impounded by Nigerian Customs Service if they fail to verify their documents before July 6, 2021, when a month grace period would have expired. The Public Relations Officers of the NCS, Joseph Atta, disclosed this on Monday in Abuja at a briefing to update the public on the ongoing audit of privately owned aircraft operating in Nigeria. Before we move away from the Punch newspaper, protesters block Abuja Airport Road and demand President Buhari's resignation over insecurity. Protesters on Monday in Abuja demanded the resignation of President Muhammadu Buhari over the rising insecurity in the country. The protesters, largely youth, demonstrated under the aegis of the #RevolutionNow. The protest was held in the early hours on Monday. They blocked the Umaru Yar'Adua way leading to the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, and made bonfires on the over-busy road, leaving motorists stranded. Right about now, we have our guest joining us from Uyo, Akwa Ibom State, Udeme Etiwoyen. He's a public affairs analyst. Good morning, Udeme. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Udeme, let's begin with the Punch newspapers this morning. On the front page of the Punch newspaper, we have the story that says, bandit and herdsmen farm occupation, insecurity grounds CBN borrowers and farmers. And farmers says loan repayment is difficult. Now, farmers are actually saying that it's difficult for them to pay the CBN farmers loan they borrowed as a result of the current insecurity, which is the clashes between the farmers and the herders for quite some time now. Now, how would you react to the story?
Well, I must first of all comment that agriculture being a major driver of both jobs and the GDP should be given topmost priority. And as we've come into a regime where the Anchor Borrowers program is taking some serious impact, it should not be allowed to be destroyed by another end of the agricultural sector, which is the cattle rearing aspect. There should not be that level of conflict where farmers are being chased out or the loans that they were given are under threat of another, value chain or another sector within the agricultural value chain. So my take would be that we encourage the mechanization, we encourage the ranching of cattle, and ensure that both livestock and crops, grow together, because that's where the economy is needs the required boost that all of us are expecting. So, as a function of maybe government, it's ideal for us to get the ranching business going, not necessarily through grazing routes, but to be able to, create ranches. Every state government, as a matter of fact, is supposed to take care of its meat supply. It doesn't have to come from one source or from a particular direction.
So you would recall that for a while now, lots of farmers have been unable to go to their farms. Now, talking about the Anchor borrowers loans, right, and the program, it's difficult for them to pay up. do you think that these farmers should be given an extra grace because they can't even go to the farm to do anything?
Well, if you speak of grace, it would mean that every anchor borrower would lay claim to the herdsman in caution. I think the ideal thing is to address the root cause or the exact problem by ensuring that bandits or herdsmen do not encroach in the lands or the farms of these farmers. However, it is important to structure or to have a good security infrastructure around these farmers as well, to let them also understand that they can be protected by the state security services, and then while also keeping invaders at bay.
All right, since we're talking about the farmers and herders clashes and the Anchors Borrowers program, let's talk a little bit about insecurity, which is kidnapping. 4 days ago, about 80 students were kidnapped in Kebbi State and alongside 5 other teachers. Now, this is affecting the education system. Now, not just in the south, not just in the north, it's coming gradually to the south-south, even if, or southeast and south-south, even if we don't have reports of those yet, because you could see that a lot of persons are still very scared of whether or not to leave their kids out to school. Now, where do we go from here?
I think the ideal thing is for government to live up to its initial responsibility of securing life. I do not subscribe to bandits or whatever you call them, criminals being treated with kids' glove. There should be no basis for negotiations, or should be no basis of treating criminals from whatever part of the country they come from with any form of anything short of the standard approach to these levels. And of course, once the people are comfortable with that or understand that government is alive to its security responsibility, I'm sure that communities and smaller ecosystem would live up to that responsibility, which I think they should. People are speaking of state policing, people are speaking of community policing. I think the whole idea is to have everybody come alive in terms of responsibility and ensure that they secure their environments in conjunction with government. Government must also ensure that they do not go in unnecessary negotiations, because once you negotiate and empower, or once you pay ransom, you empower the criminals and give them more verve to continue.
All right, Udeme, now, still talking about this kidnap, let's link it back to the Ministry of Education. You've talked about state policing, how important it is for federal government and Nigeria as a whole to take a look at state policing as a means of curbing most of these insecurities. Now, the impact this has on education, the educational system in Nigeria, do you think that in any way the Ministry of Education should have something to say about this?
Well, as a part of making a responsible policy environment within the education sector, I think that if you spend, of course, we're short of policing manpower, but if you had 100 citizens of the country in a particular ecosystem, in this case being a school, they should be the same. We should apply the same United Nations expectation of police per indigent or police per resident. So you cannot have a school with 500 children, that's a proper ecosystem, and not have a minimum of 50 security operatives. So yes, the Ministry of Education needs to understand that a part of policymaking is to ensure that whatever kind of security is required is available at the institutions to ensure that our kids are safe, not just from outsiders, but from securing security within the school environment. So yes, we must come alive in that aspect and ensure that schools are properly protected and secured.
All right, before we move away from this education and kidnap story, there are a few calls that the schools in those areas should be shut in the meantime. Do you agree with that school of thought?
Well, a whole lot might need to suffer for us to get solutions or get our acts together. While government is hoping or working assiduously towards putting an end to these challenges. I do believe that we should not put the lives of those children to risk. And if schools need to be shut, or if we need to look at innovative alternatives like virtual learning, then we should encourage it while we try to get our acts together. Without a doubt, the safety of our kids is more important than keeping the doors to the school open for whatever purpose, other than
all right, let's quickly move away from that story to another story. This one says, still on the Punch newspaper, it says protesters block Abuja Airport Road and demand President Buhari's resignation over insecurity. Now, the calls for President Buhari to resign has been on for quite some time, for a very long time now, as there was another protest yesterday in Abuja calling for the president to resign over insecurity issues. Now, do you think that, let's say peradventure, the president, I'm not saying he would resign, and the president decides to resign, do you think that would be the answer to the ongoing insecurity challenges in Nigeria?
Well, requesting for the president's resignation, I do not see how far that can go in terms of achieving much results. But demanding or placing a burden on the state to come alive in its responsibility is more of a peaceable approach. We have over the last couple of months and years, there has been greater responsibility from the part of the people, however late, to begin to make demands by way of protest, by way of speaking up, by way of open agitation. But that is a function of frustration. If it was a function of civil or civic responsibility, it will be different. So it also goes to say that the Nigerian are largely frustrated. If getting a president or leadership out through the right means, which would be either voting out a party or voting out an individual, that I would subscribe to. But clearly, it would not be feasible, and it might lead to more chaos if we look at forceful or civic approach towards taking the president out of office. Right, we can, at the same vein, place a demand on the representatives of people, the senators, the legislators, and all of them, to do the needful. I mean, if they took that protest, for instance, to the Senate and asked them to commence impeachment processes, that would be a better approach than constituting the nuisance of blocking roads and the skyrocket, causing the chaos and the already volatile nature of our politics for that threat. I will not subscribe.
All right, let's hope that at some point, because you already said that voting the president out of the country would not or might not be the way to go in Nigeria, because I also recall that at some point Nigerians agitated for the change of service chiefs, which we felt, or which Nigerians felt, would be the solution to most of the insecurity challenges rocking the country. But as it is, we had new service chiefs and we still have some challenges in the country. Let's move away from that story very quickly to this one. It says, President Buhari reintroducing Decree 4 under different guise, says stakeholders. Now, this has to do with the social media bill. You've seen the story this morning. How do you react to it?
Yes.
Can you hear
same
me?
Level of... Yes, I can hear you.
Please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, same level of frustration that Nigerians have endured over the last 6 years is coming to bear, because the one opportunity or window to rant and vent their frustrations happens to be the social media. And beyond the attempts or the need to curtail and streamline the excesses of that social media space, it's also important that there are rules, that there's a data protection policy from government. There are also rules of engagement, which government should have, before now, prior to this time, should have sat as a people to see how does this work with our policies. Yes, there's a lot of fake news flying around. Yes, there's a lot of insightful communication. Every single person, including leadership, tends to listen more to what happens in social media than even conventional media sources. So social media as it stands needs a bit of streamlining. Not to say you gag the press, not to say you stop people from expressing themselves, but we must also come alive as citizens to know what is responsible communication within the social media space. And I think that is what government is. But coming up at a time where it affects them, it affects government per se, and then they go straight to say we need to streamline it at this point. It begins to look like there's an attempt to gag the press. But away from that, also, there are a lot of the judiciary, of course, is pretty much alive with most of the, you see on most of the dailies, you see court orders on Bayelsa, court orders on Akwa Ibom, the oil spillage, and all of that. So I think that the best way to go is to strengthen our judicial system, because that is the short way to get justice. You cannot have social media trials, which is what happens in most cases. Most governments are tried on social media, and it ends there. We need to take the battle to the legislator, get the right legislation in place to effect change that will require, go to the courts to interpret the law and the constitution in a way that it suits the demands on the concerns of the citizens. So between the judiciary and the legislature, we need to address the issues that give the people a balance. We're focused more on the executive, and that is why it's beginning to look like the executive has turned draconian and beginning to, push down the laws or policies that seem to, guard the Nigerian populace.
All right, Udeme, let's move away from the Punch newspapers very quickly to the Guardian newspaper. On the front page of the Guardian newspaper, we have the story of Bayelsa State. Of course, the story of the $951 million is not new in Nigeria. And the story says, court orders federal government to pay Bayelsa $951 million derivative arrears. Now, you've seen the story. When you saw these headlines, what first came to your mind?
Responsibility from, as a matter of fact, on the Guardian top page, there are a couple of, there are two stories that caught my attention. Yes, responsibility on the part of, you notice I insist more on responsibility, on the part of the judicial process or the justice system to not just dispense justice against the people, but against the state. And if the courts can order the federal government to do the needful with regards to derivation area, I believe that the federal government should, as a part of honoring the rule of law, should adhere to these orders. And in the same vein, have the other court judgments that are within there in force with regards to the ExxonMobil and NNPC abuse or spillage or neglect of law.
Well, Udeme, it's looking like the story of $951 million between the federal government and Bayelsa State might be wrapping up pretty soon after this is all up. But let's move away from that story to electricity. The story of electricity in Nigeria, or the conversation of electricity in Nigeria, is one that is quite interesting to all Nigerians. And this headline is saying that Nigeria considers new law to unbundle the power sector. I'll quickly take the first paragraph. It says that the Electric Power Sector Reform Act 2005 introduced privatization of the power sector may become obsolete by the end of the year, as the National Assembly revealed that the new legislation was being planned to unbundle the sector. Now, getting these headlines, would you say that regardless of the fact that they are putting so much into the electricity sector, or the power sector rather, in Nigeria, do you think that would make any change in the sector?
Well, of course, power is a major requisite for economic enhancement in terms of production, in terms of services, and all the like. But guess what? We've always ever treated power like a social service, and it is not. It is a business that we need to attract the level of investment that helps us get our power sector running. Having said that, unbundling the current regime of electricity distribution companies, or even the transmission rule, or majorly power sitting on the exclusive legislative list as a concern of the federal government. Those are issues that must be quickly addressed to be able to allow the level of investment that we expect to come into the sector. Nothing stops a street or a community of maybe 50 to 100 houses from generating their own power if it's cheap enough or if they can afford it, and they are able to also dispense the power and make returns to whoever the investor is. So we need to be able to have what is being considered captive power opportunities. We need to be able to look into what transmission capabilities or opportunity might be. None of that power base should be the exclusive reserve for determination of federal government. So I don't know. I haven't seen what the new law suggests or what it seeks to. But in principle,
but do you see, if I may, do you see a change in that sector? Because it's one aspect that Nigerians are actually really struggling with.
There is great hope. Once you fix power, you've solved a greater part of the economic challenges, and it goes straight from education to even agriculture. We should also, while looking at fixing power, not be looking strictly at electric power. We should be considering renewables. We should be considering alternative power sources. That and all of these legislation, I have not seen much of it being captured. So yes, we must encourage more power initiatives and allow the unbundling of the existing infrastructure to take away that control from the federal government.
All right, Udeme, before I let you off the hook this morning, there's a story on the Vanguard newspaper. It says, Buhari's appointments. Northern elders disagree with People's Democratic Party, Afenifere, Ohanaeze Ndigbo, PANDEF, CAN, and MBF. Now, there has been some a little bit of controversy between the both parties, but this morning, the Northern elders are disagreeing with the People's Democratic Party and Ohanaeze Ndigbo's. How would you react to that?
Well, if you're a beneficiary of a particular system or approach of a system, then you must say everything what you stand to gain. I would have expected a bit more of patriotism from the Northern elders to say, is it possible to look at these appointments and see why the rest of Nigerians are, troubled or concerned that it might be a bit skewed towards the north, and the sound bites of nepotism and a particular sector of the nation holding the rest of us to ransom by way of being in power for the last 6 years should be a cause of concern to every leader who are in the north. And of course, it is a concern for leaders across the south and other parts of the country. So if for any reason a sibling raises a problem in a family setting, the ideal scenario would be for the other brothers to say, yes, let's take a look at what your concerns are. Why do you think and how do you think you can do this to ensure that the family stays safe and sound? If it happens otherwise, and then they say that the rest of the nation doesn't matter, then it probably goes to show that the union called Nigeria is under greater threat than we ever have imagined. So it is for, as an advice to the Northern elders, to do the best they can to ensure that if there are agitations, if there are concerns by other members of the Nigerian family, then they should listen to them, they should address them. The federal character principle, for in all intents and purposes, should be, replicated from the security, from everywhere you have appointments. I mean, you cannot do the same for elected positions, but where there's appointments, decisions of who to appoint should be found, then you should consider every state, you should consider every region, you should consider every stakeholder within the Nigerian state in terms of this appointment. So, without a doubt, yes, there's a feeling, there's an ill feeling of poor endurance. And everybody doesn't get carried along. So that must be addressed.
Okay, thank you so much, Udeme, for joining us this morning. Thank you for your thoughts. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, that was Udeme Etigoyen, a public affairs analyst from Uyo, Akwa Ibom State. It's the size of the package we can take this morning on Newspaper Review. Remember to join us at 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. for details of these stories and other stories. I'd like to appreciate you and our guest, that's Udeme, for joining us this morning. Thank you so much. Have a great day. And please remember to stay safe. My name is God's Time David. Bye-bye.